Do you think Rogan's the most powerful person in media?
Is the deepest connection with the most amount of people.
And that speaks to the value of podcasting, I guess.
Yeah. It's wide and it's also deep. And the advantage for him is like when people view you as a friend and want to spend an hour with you, they're going to spend 100 hours with you potentially. Like if they listen to the first one and they like it, and they listen to the second one and they like it, they're in. Like you're in as a friend. If you can get someone to listen to 2 or 3 episodes, you're connected with them. And this guy John Fio I just had on had this really interesting insight about Fio's number is what he calls it. So Dunbar's number is like ancient human beings. We would have space for 150 people in our tribe. And he says, okay, that's great. But Fio's number is in the current modern world, you're going to have 150 people, creators that you accept in your mind as friends. And so everything you do should be to try to be someone's best friend and to try to be in that 150. And so if you think about it, a lot of people are building out their 150 right now and they don't even realize it. And so that's not to say we can't update our 150 all the time and that in 2030, someone could have their 150 now. And then in 2030, someone could be like, oh, like I'll take this guy out and put this guy in. Like, but it's interesting way to think about. We have room for only 150 people in our head. And if you think about that for creators, it creates a different mindset for creating.
It's really interesting because we all follow I don't know how many people I follow, like 2,000 people on Instagram. Like,
yeah.
What the hell am I doing? Yeah. 150. I don't know if that's a lot or a little. Sort of a interesting number to distinguish because if you've ever talked to a room of 150 people, it's a lot of people. Obviously, in social media terms, it feels like there's nobody there.
Well, it's so fascinating because it's like how many different people do you click their stories for? Is it over 150? Is it under 150? Is it around 150? Like, I'd be curious to like see my own stats on that. I don't know.
It's probably around 100. Maybe I feel like it's less than 150.
Yeah, I feel like it's less as well.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's going to be fun to watch how all these worlds play out. But podcasting, those who stay consistent, have fun. One thing that I loved hearing, I think it was from the guy Nas Daily, and he said that there are infinitely more stories in the world that haven't been told than there are people to tell them.
Yes.
And I love that because if you follow like news or sports or things like that, it feels ingested. It feels like everybody's talking about the same thing. The Super Bowl happens. Everybody's talking about the Super Bowl. I don't need to hear you talk about the Super Bowl. I want to hear a story about the basketball player or the football player in Africa who trains on a field and dodges bullets every day. There's a guy on Instagram that I follow who does that. Like, I want to hear his story. So I just loved that he said that because it struck a chord. And I believe that to be very true. And also why I don't believe in the concept of competition in the medium of telling stories other than current news, which I think is bogus anyways, because it doesn't mean anything.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why ability to have a filter is so important. And the ability to be able to identify those stories is really where all the juice lies. It's like your ability to type out prompts in ChatGPT is great, but your ability to find somebody on the street and be like, that's a story that I want to tell. I mean, I remember in 2019 saying to myself, going to yoga for the first time, and this teacher was phenomenal. Like, this woman was such an amazing human being, had so much empathy, love, and was like so great. The things she would say would always make me think. And I remember thinking to myself, I wish I could tell this story, her story, to more people. And now I have a podcast, and it's like, I should send an email to that woman and have her on my podcast. And I will now because of this conversation. But it's like, when you're in the business of telling stories, you just have to your eyes always have to be out. You have to ask your Uber driver, what's the most interesting thing you did today? Or like, why did you decide to do this? And like, be on the lookout. I think that's a very useful practice because you never know where the best story is really going to come from.